The millionaire's son chose the maid as his tutor. What he discovered about her was incredible. The world of privilege wrapped around Jason like a suffocating shroud. In Willow Creek, people saw him as the golden boy, heir to a legacy marked by wealth and power. But beneath the well-tailored suits and expensive sneakers was a simmering discontent, a gnawing desperation to break free from expectations so suffocating they threatened to drown him. Every grade below an A was a pinch of poison in his father's eyes. Every moment spent struggling with textbooks became a moment wasted in a world that demanded he excel. Was Jason merely a reflection of his father's ambitions? That question clawed at him daily. The pressure was relentless, nearly crushing when he opted out of the expensive tutor they hired, choosing instead to learn from Mia, their housemaid. Mia, wise beyond her years from a life full of hard-won lessons, filled the attic with stories that defied the wealth surrounding them. In the cozy chaos of those slopes of dusty cardboard boxes, Jason danced between exhilaration and guilt. The connection he forged with Mia was profound, two worlds meeting, disparate yet intertwined, yet each session set off turbulent waves of concern. Would his family accept this shift? Would he even risk his father's cage of expectations for Mia? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mia's stories about her immigrant parents, filled with sacrifices and silence, ignited something inside Jason, a longing to be bold in a world where privilege often stifled ambition. He practically hung on her words, charting paths to literary horizons she could only dream of. A flicker of passion bloomed in Jason's heart, the budding urge to write, but alongside it slithered doubt and anxiety. How could he reconcile this new aspiration with the mantle of success expected of him? The whispers from his so-called friends sharpened into daggers. The fear of ridicule hung over him like a storm cloud, as he stood at the intersection of duty and desire. Then came the day Jason found Mia's hidden stories, beautifully penned in secret. He felt the urgency of her dreams pressing upon him, a force stronger than any expectation. But revealing her talent meant stepping further into a world where he could lose everything. As the Willow Creek Gala approached, the verdict of social acceptance loomed ever larger. Would he be able to defend Mia against a tide of judgment? Would he have the courage to choose her over the glitter of his family's legacy? In that moment, amidst the cacophony of loyalty and ambition, Jason's heart raced through unfathomable conflict. A question resounded, one that would shape his very identity: was he the millionaire's son or something more? Everything in him pulled tight, standing on the brink of breaking free. Fear danced with resolve, the stakes were higher than ever, and on the horizon loomed potential disgrace, yet the cries of his heart beckoned him closer to Mia's world, the only place where he no longer felt invisible. With the gala just days away, Jason felt time slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Every tick of the clock echoed the mounting dread that intertwined with a burgeoning sense of purpose. Mia's stories had ignited something fierce within him, an insatiable hunger to express, to share, to live beyond the boundaries set by his father's influence. But how could he balance these newfound aspirations with the crushing expectations that surrounded him? Staring at his reflection one morning, Jason recognized a stranger in the glass. The polished exterior of the millionaire's son wore thin, the weight of inherited privilege felt heavier than ever. He had always been the embodiment of everyone's dreams, his father's ambitions morphing into his skin, degrees on walls staking claims on his future. Yet here he stood, drawn toward a world defined by authenticity rather than appearance, struggling against the current of his fate. His mind buzzed with thoughts of Mia's hidden writings, filled with sentiment and strength, narratives that transcended mere words. They depicted lives shaped by resolve and resilience, contrasting sharply with his own tailored experiences. Jason's decisions now seemed as fractured as those stories dulcetly whispered in the attic. Would laying bare Mia's talent risk everything he had, or could it be the bridge between his world and hers? During their next session, the attic felt charged. Hesitance cloaked the atmosphere as Jason approached the topic of Mia's writing. The sunlight filtering through the wooden beams illuminated her face, revealing a mix of vulnerability and strength. "Your words," he began, confidence wavering slightly, "have power like, tremendous power." He swallowed hard, gathering courage like the storm clouds he could feel closing in. "I found your stories. They demand to be shared." To his surprise, a pall settled over her expression. "Not everyone appreciates the kind of pain my words carry," Mia replied softly, her eyes flickering with unspoken fears. "Why would you want to risk it all?" The question left Jason stunned, bouncing in his chest with the ferocity of a trapped bird. "Why indeed?" "Because I need to show people that there's more to life than what." He hesitated, clutching at the words like a lifeline, "than what we've been taught to value." For the first time, he was confronting not only Mia's apprehensions but also his own deep-rooted anxieties. What followed was a silence thick enough to choke on. A shared understanding transcended the confines of their disparate backgrounds. There was fear, yes, but also an exhilarating hint of rebellion against the expectations that threatened to bind them both. The day of the gala dawned, a spectacle of glitz and glamour. Jason found himself surrounded by familiar faces yet felt profoundly detached. As he adjusted his tie, keeping an eye on the entrance, his thoughts raced back to Mia. Would she stand at his side, courageously resisting the judgment of a world that would never understand? Could he drag her into the same arena where he himself felt so astonishingly out of place? He could already sense the electric tension between the two lives that, until now, had seemed irreconcilable. In that moment, he realized the truth buried deep within him. The boldness he admired in Mia had mirrored the resistance nestling in his own heart, whispering a call to action. As they stood poised at the brink of a decision that would reshape not only the gala but the course of their lives, Jason's heart thundered against the walls of the legacy he had come so painfully close to ignoring. Would he claim an identity of his own, or would he fold back into the folds of privilege, surrendering the uncomfortable choices that lay before him? The night was dark, and the unyielding question loomed: could Jason truly embrace the narrative change, or would he retreat into the shadows of expectation? The cacophony of the gala surged around Jason, a whirlwind of laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations that faded into a distant hum. He stood at the edge of the crowded ballroom, a figure in a tailored suit, lost amidst the kaleidoscope of shimmering fabrics and ostentatious displays of wealth. The ghosts of his father's expectations hovered over him like storm clouds, heavy and threatening. He forced a smile, but the mask felt stifling, an oppressive mold he no longer wished to inhabit. His gaze darted to the entrance with a fervent hope. Would Mia come? The thought ignited a flicker of defiance that etched deeper lines of resolve on his forehead. He had invited her, but the moment of truth ripened like fruit on the vine. Could he really expect her presence in a realm that thrived on superficiality? The gala was more than just a social event for Jason, it was a battlefield. Each polite inquiry, every cheerfully packaged compliment wielded by guests he had known for years, felt like a dagger wrapped in velvet. At any moment, someone could challenge his integrity, attempt to dissect his identity along the lines of privilege or pedigree. As he maneuvered through throngs of familiar faces, the very roots of his unease continued to twist and tug at his core. Then, across the room, she appeared. Mia moved like a breath of fresh air, her demeanor a stark contrast to the sparklers and sequins that enveloped them. Clad in a simple dress that clung to her frame in all the right places, she emanated an essence of authenticity that pulsated through the air. When their eyes met, something clicked within Jason. His heart clamored with a newfound urgency, shaking off the shackles of past expectations. In that heartbeat, he decided that the world he had known would no longer dictate his choices. "Mia!" he called out, weaving through the throng towards her, each step pulling him farther away from his inherited constraints. As she approached, her expression revealed a mix of apprehension and excitement, mirroring his own inner turmoil. "Jason," she exclaimed quietly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You actually wanted me to come?" "I wanted you here," he replied, feeling weight lift off his shoulders. Your words deserve to be heard, not tucked away in dusty corners. And I need to explore beyond what's expected. The air between them hummed with palpable tension, a shared understanding swirling in the next moment. Back in the shelter of his family's past, Jason had shunned confrontation, opting instead for a smooth facade that pleased everyone but himself. But tonight, he felt the urge to break free. Their discussion lingered in the attic's quiet warmth, where dreams danced in ink. With Mia by his side, he could summon the courage to confront the expectations that threatened to encase him. The evening wore on, and as the spotlight glared down from crystalline chandeliers above, the opportunity unfurled itself. Jason squeezed Mia's hand, an anchor and signal of their collective audacity. We're sharing your stories tonight, he declared. What? Here? She stammered, her eyes wide with surprise. In front of them? Yes, he reaffirmed, his voice unwavering. Those stories are powerful, Mia, and they belong in this arena. We're on the brink of something bigger than ourselves. His determination shocked himself, but the thrill of rebellion coursed through him. It was time to unveil his own narrative, the juxtaposition of privilege and purpose. The stage felt set for a confrontation. The same society that had always dictated their lives, fierce with its judgments, now stood ready to face the unknown. Yet, as Jason cleared his throat, the crowd's chatter faded, replaced by the weight of the silence that loomed like a storm. The moment of truth was upon them. Would he have the strength to bring them in, to expose those buried truths? Would Mia lend her voice to the revelations they were about to unearth? As he prepared to speak, an unexpected figure loomed in his periphery, a symbol of the very privilege he sought to challenge. His father, with an unreadable expression, watched him with eyes that cut through the crowd. The stakes just escalated. The night, now infused with potency, demanded an answer. Would Jason risk everything for the sake of authenticity, or would he retreat once more into the shadows of his father's expectations? Jason's breath caught in his throat as his father's gaze bore into him, a reminder of every unvoiced expectation that had loomed over his life. The silence transformed into a living entity, wrapping around him tighter with each passing moment. His heart raced, a frenetic rhythm matching the pulse of revelation that surged through him. At that moment, he could feel the clamoring voices of his past, urging him to retreat, to resume the comfortable role of the dutiful son, the polished socialite who played the game without question. Yet, the buoyancy in Mia's hand steadied him, a visceral reminder that change was anchored in vulnerability and courage. He swallowed hard, preparing to rip off the metaphorical band-aid that had stifled his life for far too long. Mia, he said, steadying his voice with a newfound determination, tell them what they need to hear. She hesitated, the surprise still plastered across her face, as if his words were unreal, floating in a realm where the impossible seemed conceivable. But in that instant, Jason saw a flicker of understanding ignite in her eyes. It was the same spark that had drawn her to share her stories with him in the attic, the connection that had allowed her to lay bare the truths of her struggles and aspirations. An intimate silence formed, the room collectively holding its breath, awaiting the unfolding narrative. The tension thickened as Jason felt the crowd shift, their silence pregnant with curiosity and skepticism. He sought the courage to confront their expectations but knew the struggle would unfold not only in his words but also in the gaze of those who questioned his worth. Mia stepped forward, her voice high yet steady, like the first break of dawn casting away the remnants of night. I come from a world where moments of authenticity are rare. Fast-paced lives often neglect the beauty of personal narratives. It's not just about material gain, it's about connection. My experiences reflect the struggles of everyday people battling against their circumstances. Each word she spoke brought Jason deeper into the reality he had yearned to shed light on. He caught his father's eye, rebelling against the stoic exterior that had defined their relationship for far too long. An unspoken challenge passed between them, this was the reckoning he had long avoided. The moment was profound. He was prepared to forge a path beyond the shadows of expectation. His mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just an expression of rebellion, but a chance for introspection and growth. He leaned closer to Mia, emboldened by her approach. They began weaving a collective narrative of authenticity, gradually tearing down the walls of social facades. As the stories flowed, faces in the audience shifted from skepticism to intrigue. Conversations began to bloom among the crowd, whispers echoing with a commitment to meaning over materialism. Yet, Jason's father remained anchored in his stoic expression, an unyielding sentinel amidst the shifting tides of change. They pressed forward, digging deeper into the tenets of truth cloaked in privilege and disenfranchisement, and something inside Jason shifted dramatically. This wasn't merely a rebellion against his upbringing, it was an awakening of potential he had never realized was entangled in his identity. He was transforming, not just for himself but for every person in that room. But just as a semblance of excitement began to build, a dissonant voice broke through, slicing through the energy like a knife. "And what, pray tell, gives you the right to speak for us?" A figure loomed in the back, arms crossed defiantly, an old acquaintance who had always epitomized the very privilege Jason sought to oppose. The challenge hung in the air, thick and palpable. The dynamic shifted dramatically. Would Jason be able to defend his newfound position with strength, or would this confrontation unravel the very narrative he was attempting to create? The tension intensified as Jason prepared to face the question that threatened to destabilize the foundation he had begun to build. Once more, he had to confront the web of expectations threaded through his life, and this time, with everything on the line, he couldn't afford to falter. Jason felt a surge of adrenaline course through him, the weight of the question igniting a fire within. He glanced from Mia to the crowd, absorbing the mix of anticipation and uncertainty. His fingers clenched unconsciously at his sides, an instinctive response to the challenge presented. "Maybe it's not about whether I have the right to speak," he started, his voice coming out steadier than he felt. "Maybe it's about who we choose to uplift. I'm not here to speak for people, I'm here to share how we can create space for those voices to be heard." He took a step forward, grounding himself in the certainty of his newfound journey, the chaos in his mind transforming into clarity. "I grew up in a world where my path was paved by expectations, but those same expectations blind us to the complexities of others' lives. I've seen the struggles of those who don't have the luxury of choosing their narrative." The room remained silent, riveted by his unexpected assertiveness. He could feel the scrutiny from his father's piercing gaze, an anchor trying to pull him back, but he fought against the tide. He wasn't merely performing, he was reaching for the pieces of himself he had almost lost. Mia stepped in, her presence radiating support as she nodded in agreement. "My story is a reflection of countless others. It's not a privilege to be narrated, but rather a responsibility to engage in genuine dialogue. This is not about me or Jason, it's about building bridges between our experiences." Jason scanned the crowd, observing a slow transformation as some faces softened, the skepticism starting to yield to understanding. Yet, the figure in the back, still crossing their arms, remained defiantly skeptical. "Do you honestly believe that any of us would allow someone like you to speak on our behalf? You who have lived a life of comfort." The tone dripped with disdain, igniting Jason's frustration. "I don't expect you to hand me that responsibility," he asserted, edging closer to the figure. "What I believe is that if we share our truths, we create our own spaces. Authentic storytelling isn't an act of speaking for others, but a collaborative act of connection." He felt a sense of liberation coursing through him as he stood his ground. The metaphorical band-aid had been ripped off, exposing a raw, pulsing reality that flowed through him, the realization of his own agency in shaping narratives and the power of shared experience. The dissonance in the room was palpable. Some audience members leaned forward, intrigued, while others recoiled, unsure how to process the challenge rising against the status quo. "Look around you," Jason continued, gesturing to those gathered. "We are all bound by shared humanity, whether we want to recognize it or not. It is our responsibility to ensure every voice finds its echo." His heart raced, and the weight of his father's gaze bore down heavier, yet Jason felt a sense of strength blossoming within him. Every word felt like a step further into uncharted territory, a manifestation of his growth and determination to reclaim his narrative. But amidst the growing wave of engagement, Jason sensed the opposition he was facing was not just external. Doubts flickered in the corners of his mind, echoing with insecurities brewed through years of expectation. Was he truly capable of leading this conversation, of shifting perspectives? And yet, the uncertainty fueled him. The moment wasn't about perfection, it was about authenticity. As he spoke, he realized he wasn't just fighting for validation, he was advocating for a version of himself that had always been buried beneath layers of expectation. Just as the room began to shift, a voice sliced through the air, a high, mocking tone from the figure in the back, adjustments in stance betraying the tension. You think you can just step in and make changes? What makes you believe anyone will take you seriously? The question thrust itself into the fray, bringing Jason's internal struggle back to the forefront. He had a choice to make: would he back down and capitulate to the self-doubt narrowing his focus, or could he harness the birth of this new self, shaping it into something more resilient? In that moment, he realized the path to his own rebirth hinged upon the response he crafted next. The stakes were higher than ever, and the face of the challenge loomed larger than it ever had. Would he rise to fully step into his role, or would he slip back beneath the shadow of expectation? The direction of his journey hung in the balance, awaiting his next move. Jason's mind raced, the weight of the challenge sending his heart thudding like a drum. He inhaled sharply, grounding himself in the chaos swirling around him. The skepticism he faced felt like an anchor tugging him down, yet he clung to the realization that this was his moment, a crucible in which he could forge something stronger. I can't pretend to have lived experiences that aren't mine, he replied, forcing a confidence he didn't fully feel. What I can do is listen, learn, and leverage any privilege this journey offers, to illuminate those voices that go unheard. But I need to earn that trust. The tension in the room shifted, an invisible thread tugging at the crowd's collective consciousness. The figure in the back, still with arms crossed, seemed to simmer but not relent. Jason could almost hear their inner conflicts, see the doubts they grasped as tightly as they held their arms. Would they let their resistances crumble against the assertion of a millionaire's son claiming solidarity? Mia stepped forward again, voice steady and unwavering. Challenge us if you must, but ask yourself why that's your instinct. Is it about protecting a narrative? We've all carried the weight of others' expectations. She met the skeptic's gaze unapologetically. Jason felt a surge of gratitude toward Mia. Her support catalyzed his thoughts, nudging them toward deeper realizations. This wasn't just a dialogue, it was a revelation of interdependence. He could shape the conversation but needed the voices of others to entwine with his. Maybe he hadn't just stepped out of a shadow, he was beginning to illuminate paths for many. Let us redefine the narrative together, Jason proposed, sensing a shift in energy. Every perspective is a piece of the larger puzzle. If I fail today, it's not just my failure, it is a missed opportunity for all of us. This framing seemed to resonate. A few audience members exchanged glances, and Jason dared to hope he was planting seeds of change. Behind him, a growing murmur of support rippled through the crowd. He felt a small but unmistakable light igniting within him. It wasn't about tearing down the barriers but rather dismantling his own misconceptions about privilege, voice, and vulnerability. Then, unexpectedly, the critical voice rose again, cutting through the moment. You speak of solidarity, yet isn't that also a form of control? The question reflected a deeper nuance, poking at the very heart of his assertions. How do you ensure this isn't merely posturing? This was not a moment to falter. Instead, it was a challenge to confront the layers of his own psyche, to peel back the veneer of his privilege. It begins with acknowledgement, he replied, his determination now solidifying. The intention must be pure. It's not an act of control, but an invitation, a willingness to yield the stage when it's called for. I know I've been up against certain truths without really seeing them. Now, I want to do more than just speak, I want to listen actively. The crowd's energy shifted again, curiosity now sparking among some skeptics. The person in the back unfolded their arms slightly, betraying just a hint of intrigue. Could this change the game? Jason suddenly felt a rush of insight into his next step. This conversation had stirred something within him that had long lay dormant, and with each exchange, he dismantled a piece of the self-doubt inherited from generations, but in his eagerness, he couldn't ignore the gnawing fear: what if he truly misstepped? The weight of possibility bore down as he grappled with an essential truth: this dance of advocacy was fraught not only with triumph but with vulnerability. Jason was teetering on the edge of transformation, not merely into a voice, but a facilitator, an ally, and a curious student. His next words could cement those aspirations firmly into reality, but they also held the potential for misinterpretation. As he prepared to respond again, a flicker of recognition broke through. It wasn't about mastering every narrative. It was about the freedom to explore the spaces in between. The moment was electric and engulfed in ambiguity, and Jason felt a profound shift within. He was not just reclaiming his narrative but crafting a shared one. What he would finally say next could open doors both for himself and others, but would the courage hold? Or would he revert to the shadows of his upbringing? The air thickened with the tension of that uncertain path ahead. How could he navigate it without losing himself? Maybe what we all need, he started, voice steady but eyes scanning for acceptance, is to learn how to not just speak but to truly listen. Maybe that's how we shift the narrative together. In that instant, it wasn't just a call to action, it was a question hanging in the air: would the crowd rise to that challenge? Would they demand more than mere words? The coming moments would reveal the answers, but the bond of connection lingered, tantalizingly close yet profoundly delicate. The next step loomed ahead, and with it, Jason understood, awaited the very essence of his journey: true transformation. Jason's voice trembled slightly, but he steadied himself and looked at the audience as if they were a tapestry of stories waiting to be told. Each pair of eyes seemed to reflect his own fears and aspirations, a blend of skepticism and hope woven into a fabric that felt both familiar and alien. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere, a tentative hand reaching out of a sea of uncertainty. The murmur of engagement grew louder, igniting an unexpected surge of courage within him. This wasn't merely about asserting his perspective. It was about weaving his thread into a more intricate narrative, one that involved real people with real stakes. Choosing to speak again, he focused on the harsh reality that glimmered beneath the conversation. "Let us confront the discomfort," he said. "It's easy to criticize, harder to engage. And the real challenge lies in our ability to be vulnerable, to risk our assumptions for the sake of understanding." The crowd listened, their collective tension morphing fluidly into a spark of curiosity. Some heads nodded. Perhaps he was striking a chord after all. Behind him, Jason felt Mia's presence, a grounding force, but he could also sense those who still opposed him. The figure with crossed arms lurked at the edge of his periphery, their skepticism a haunting reminder of the roadblocks ahead. What would it take to truly connect? As those thoughts swirled, he surprised himself with a sudden revelation about the very nature of connection. "It's a privilege to share a space with all of you," Jason continued, his voice growing stronger. "And with that privilege comes the responsibility to ensure that our exchanges empower rather than silence. We can challenge each other not just in pursuit of answers but in the spirit of growth." A chuckle broke the tension, a reluctant admission from one audience member, and Jason seized this opening. "Growth requires discomfort," he declared. "It isn't pleasant, but it's necessary." In that moment, Jason noticed the frustration etched into the face of the skeptical figure. The arms were still crossed, but the tightness in their posture seemed to waver, a crack in the barrier he hadn't anticipated. He took a step closer, metaphorically reaching across the divide. "What is it you hope to hear? What would it take for you to feel heard?" This wasn't just a moment of dialogue, it transformed into an unanticipated confrontation of ideals. The critical voice finally unfolded their arms, leaning forward slightly. "What if we're tired of hearing voices that sound like yours? What if we want to be the ones telling our stories?" Jason inhaled deeply. That was the crux of his struggle, recognizing and respecting the boundaries of others. "You're right," he replied with sincerity. "It's time I did more than just speak. It's time I actively listened and practiced the humility required to make space for everyone's voice." "What stories would you share if the stage were yours?" A profound silence enveloped the room, the question hung palpably in the air. Jason could feel his heart racing, excitement laced with anxiety, realizing that he had ushered in a challenge that was far more significant than he had intended. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, he pondered what the crowd might offer. Would their stories reaffirm his understanding or plunge him deeper into discomfort? By confronting shared narratives, would they help him redefine his own? As the silence deepened, Jason stood with unwavering resolve. He was ready to listen, to absorb whatever revelations might emerge. But in the pit of his stomach, anxiety twisted tightly. What hidden truths would come to light? What if their stories changed everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him? This was a turning point, the potential to delve into a well of Ubuntu, a concept of shared humanity that could reshape his understanding. Just as he was prepared for the first voice to break that silence, another thought pulled at him. How far was he willing to wander into the labyrinth of whispered truths? As he held his breath for the first response, he realized this journey had just begun, and the essence of his transformation now lay in the answers waiting to be unwrapped. Would the answers redefine not only the narrative before him but the very fabric of his identity? The stillness shattered when a voice emerged, hesitant but unmistakably fervent. "I've spent so much of my life being overlooked," a woman stated, her words steadying the tremor in the air. "Every time I try to share my story, it feels like I'm shouting into the void. What makes your commentary worth more than mine?" Jason felt the weight of her gaze as it locked onto his. It was a challenge, no longer just an invitation to listen. He instinctively shifted, feeling the need to protect his fragile confidence. This moment demanded more. He had opened the door, now, he must step inside. "You're right," he admitted, swallowing the bitterness that came with humility. "I've been so focused on validation through my voice that I've neglected the truth in ours." "What led you to this feeling?" Her eyes softened, as if she sensed his shift. "I've battled for my voice to be heard in a world that prefers silence. Every job I took, every table I cleared, I became just another face in the background. I learned to speak softly, to blend in. But every time I did, it chipped away at who I am." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the audience. Each word seemed to peel back layers, revealing not just her pain but Jason's own. What had he silenced in himself to fit the mold expected of him? Were the stories he told mere echoes of the voices he had disregarded? "I listened to your struggle, and I can't help but feel the weight of my own privilege," he confessed, assessing the jagged edges of his past. "What kind of stories would I have told if I had faced that same dismissal? How do I bridge the gap?" The woman's demeanor shifted. "It begins with respect. Make space for narratives you may not understand. It's not about validation. It's about the willingness to witness without judgment." Jason's pulse quickened. The revelation radiated through him, a profound understanding that to grow meant unraveling the very fabric of what he had previously accepted as truth. It wasn't just about hearing, it was about engagement. A commitment to explore complexities without imposing his own interpretations. As he navigated through this realization, a man in the back chimed in. "You think vulnerability will pave the way? You're so wrapped up in your journey that you see only what you want to. What if your compassion is just a facade?" The grip of disbelief stung Jason deeply. A flicker of defensiveness rose within him, but he fought it back. Instead, this voice challenged him to reassess his intentions. Was this really about empathy, or merely a self-serving exploration cloaked in a guise of connection? "Perhaps you're right," he said, the cold knot of self-awareness settling in. "But I want to change that. I want to confront the facade I've built. I've recognized a desire, no, a necessity to genuinely engage with all of you. The question is, how do I do that effectively?" The air thickened with substantial tension. Each persona in the crowd revealed snippets of dissatisfaction or struggle, yet beneath the murmurs dwelled unspoken desires for connection. Could he mine the depths of those complexities without losing himself in the process? Watching the audience transformed from spectators into collaborators invigorated his spirit. It wasn't just an isolated journey anymore, it was collective. Each individual held a piece of the narrative he desperately wanted to construct, a mosaic of truths intertwined with their own life experiences. As voices began to rise, weaving tales both poignant and raw, Jason felt a palpable shift within himself. A commitment formed: stay present, listen deeply, and hold space. Yet, doubt intruded, slinking into the corners of his mind. Could he uphold the sacredness of their stories without folding them into his own? Just as the dialogue reached a crescendo, Jason realized he stood on the precipice of something larger than himself. He suddenly imagined the threads of individual stories intertwining, each anomaly creating a vibrant tapestry of shared experience. Would he find his place within this intricate work, or would the revelations extract from him more than he was prepared to confront? With each response building a sense of urgency, he understood it was now or never. What relentless truths lingered beneath the surface, threatening to change his perspective irrevocably? The moment would soon arrive when he had to unmask layers both foreign and familiar, but the very road ahead felt daunting. The time had come to face the questions that challenged his identity. Could he become a steward of the stories offered, or would vulnerability expose just too much? As the final voices trailed off, Jason found himself enveloped in an ocean of silence, a resonating quiet that felt charged with potential. The faces around him, once merely silhouettes, became vivid portraits of determination and heartache. Each expression held a story, lives threaded through struggles he had not yet begun to comprehend. In that moment, an unexpected clarity washed over him. It was not just about amplifying voices, but rather about building bridges. Each story shared was a stepping stone toward greater empathy, a pathway leading him out of the shadow of his limitations. He realized that his role could transcend mere delivery of content. He had the opportunity to curate an experience, to offer the podium back to those who had occupied the margins for too long. Jason took a deep breath, feeling the weight of a newfound commitment. Let us explore the depths of these stories together. What does it mean to be truly seen? What do we gain from bearing witness to one another? His voice was steadier now, infused with a sense of purpose that resonated within the gathering. A young man, his eyes glistening with emotion, responded. Sometimes it's terrifying to be seen. It means becoming vulnerable, to expose the hidden scars and the jagged edges. Can you handle that kind of honesty? The question landed heavily in the air, a challenge wrapped in a shroud of fear. Jason hesitated, recalling his own scars, the wounds he had kept carefully tucked away. Each recollection felt like another layer of his facade crumbling. He had prided himself on vulnerability, yet beneath the surface lay the very shame he fought so hard to dismiss. Yes, I want to handle it, he said, voice crackling with sincerity. But I need to know how I can do this without overshadowing your truths. I'm here to learn. I don't want to plunder stories, I want to honor them. No sooner had he uttered the words than a woman interjected. If you want to handle that honesty, you need to extract the lessons from it. But that requires you to peel back your own layers first. Are you truly prepared for what you might find? Tension prickled along Jason's skin. Each question probed deeper, demanding a confrontation with the narratives that shaped him. The thought of confronting his own history, his privileges, his indifference, the layers of socio-economic detachment was daunting. But perhaps the only way to truly engage was to dig into his own experiences. Let us dig, then, he finally said, an electric determination infusing his tone. Together, we'll wade through the complexities. I want to know how we can move past discomfort. I want you to share your struggles, your truths, so I may reflect on mine. A flicker of excitement danced through the audience, a bond forming over shared vulnerability. Yet a new realization loomed in his thoughts. Unraveling their stories would mean grappling with the truths hidden in his own. He understood that this endeavor could very well challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, before he could process the implications, the woman whose initial challenge had spurred his transformation spoke again. Remember, Jason, as you create space for others to share, you must also brace yourself for unanticipated revelations. You might discover parts of yourself that you have long buried. A soft gasp rippled through the audience, but Jason felt the sting of those words settle into him. Unanticipated revelations. Those two words felt like a dare, a provocation to explore the untouched corners of his psyche. What lurked behind those shadows? Could he emerge intact and enlightened, or would the exposure to others' truths leave him utterly unmoored? The answers danced just beyond reach, obscured by both anticipation and dread. He could sense that every story had the potential not just to alter the narrative of others, but to reshape his own in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Jason squared his shoulders, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited him in this journey. Let us begin. Tell me your stories, and I'll share mine in return. We'll hold each other accountable, exploring the connections we've hidden away. But in that moment, Jason knew the forthcoming exchanges would not only test his willingness to listen, the journey would compel him to revisit his own reflections. Who would he end up becoming through this immersive process? Would the revelations redefine him entirely? As the first story began to unfold, a bittersweet anxiety twisted within him. Could he fully embrace this journey, knowing it might unearth strands of his identity that he had long forgotten? What truths were left unexamined, waiting in the silence for him to discover? The paths ahead tangled and unclear, beckoning him to step further into uncharted territories of being. As the final story resonated deeply within Jason, his journey reached a pivotal climax, momentum surging like a tidal wave threatening to wash away every facade he had previously clutched. In the aftermath of shared vulnerability and revealing narratives, Jason stood transformed, no longer merely the millionaire's son, but a conduit for understanding, an architect of connection bridging disparate worlds. With each shared story, he felt walls crumble not only around him but within him. Layers of privilege and expectation peeled back to expose the core of truth he yearned to embrace. The spectrum of experiences left him awash with a sense of responsibility. He was no longer a passive observer, but an active participant in the human tapestry unfolding before him. The tension thick in the air was offset by a profound realization. The fight for authenticity was tied intricately to the recognition of the narratives he had almost ignored. Mia's input was constant and unwavering, each word a reminder of the strength found in vulnerability. It's about forging connections, she whispered during a quiet moment when the crowd's energy dipped. Empathy paves the way for understanding. Jason returned her gaze, fully aware of the path they had shared from attic sessions to this moment illuminated by honesty. It happened seamlessly. He transitioned into discussions beyond the gala, understanding that he would need to engage his privileged platform to advocate for others. The stories had lit a spark, and instead of dimming it with the confines of expectation, he found the fire within himself was now raging, a passion to uplift, to speak not just for himself but for those around him. In the coming weeks, he spearheaded initiatives to incorporate real voices from diverse sectors typically absent from the discussion table, inviting storytellers, artists, and everyday heroes to share their truths. Jason established workshops aimed at empowering those with stories, amplifying voices that had once been silenced. Where he once felt like a counterfeit dancing in the realm of wealth, he now bore the mantle of a champion for authenticity. With tangible results on the horizon, recognition began to seep in. Local publications celebrated Jason's efforts, honoring him with accolades for his pursuit of social engagement through creative storytelling. His fear of ridicule faded as days turned into moments of legitimate empowerment. His personal awakening intertwined with the triumphs of those he supported. Recognition rippled even within his family dynamics. At a dinner with his parents, as they discussed his initiatives, his father choked back judgment and instead, astonished Jason with praise. It was a monumental shift. The weight of familial expectations was no longer a heavy shroud but a backdrop against which Jason could paint his own identity. Yet, even more profound was the reconnection with Mia. Together, they collaborated on a published anthology, each contributing narratives to foster hope and understanding across divides. Through those stories, Mia's voice found its rightful place in the realm of published literature, recognized beyond the previous confines of her position in Jason's household. It was both her story and a testament to their journey, a shared success that brought him immeasurable pride. The contrasts he had once perceived, privilege versus struggle, expectation versus authenticity, had dissolved into a single narrative filled with connection, empowerment, and growth. Every anxiety faded in light of purpose. Whispers of doubt grew faint, replaced with the sonic resonance of change he initiated within his community, and more importantly, within himself. Standing on this firm ground, Jason understood he was now more than just an heir to wealth, he was a catalyst for transformation. No longer confined to the gilded cage of expectations, he stepped forward with solid confidence and a recognized competence, a champion of voices long disregarded and a writer of his own compelling story. As he sat at their favorite cafe with Mia, eagerly discussing their next collaborative efforts while savoring simple morsels of existence, he reflected on the grand arc of this journey, the profound realization that real wealth lay in stories shared, in connections forged, and in lives transformed. This was Jason's new horizon, a place of authenticity and growth. He had not only achieved personal fulfillment but had also stepped into his role as a mentor, a leader, and, ultimately, an advocate. He had truly become a voice beyond privilege, proving that genuine fulfillment arises from embracing all facets of humanity. Now, it's your turn. Don't miss out. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories, and this is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm so we can keep sharing these valuable journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans recognize the importance of uplifting personal stories. Act now.